I don't know if the government will let things get out of hand or how rapidly they could get out of hand, but I always think about Katrina. Look at Weimar Republic. Look at Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Look at Venezuela.
Today, I have a special guest for you, Shawn Williamson. We're going to talk about the economy and specific markets. Also, a very important topic to all of us, wealth preservation. This is the first in a series of interviews we'll do with Shawn. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you soon. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Ron's Basement. Today, I have a special guest, and we are going to talk about wealth preservation. Shawn Williamson. And Shawn and I were talking offline before the interview that how important it is to understand who you are listening to when you're taking financial advice. Consider the source. So I'm going to run through just a few of Shawn's credentials, and then we'll listen to what he has to say. Shawn's a CPA, an MBA. He's also an accredited business valuation through the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. He's generated substantial wealth over the last 30 years, investing in stocks, bonds, commercial real estate, residential real estate, farmland, precious metals, and more. He acquired a controlling interest in a small CPA firm in St. Louis 21 years ago and led it to 21 consecutive years of increased revenue and profit. He's a published author with 75 articles. Successful Farming Magazine. You can check those out at agriculture.com. He's published a book that you can buy on Amazon. I'll put a link to that in the description below. He started investing in stocks at the age of 16, and when he was 15, he bought his first 10 ounces of silver. Shawn, welcome to Ron's Basement. If there's anything you'd like to add, please feel free.
Okay. Yeah, I got these out just to show you. There's my first investment ever in 1985. 10 ounces of Indian head rounds that I paid $7 a piece for.
And how many ounces is that?
10 ounces.
10. All right. Well, here's my 10 ounces, as my viewers know. Yeah. Well, we both keep 10 ounces of silver at our house. You know, we can't go wrong with that. So did I miss anything in the introduction that you'd like to add in terms of what you've done, what you've experienced over the last 30 years?
Well, like you said, I've tried to invest in about anything I could to make a buck. I've tried it all.
Yeah.
Virtually.
Yeah.
And some things have worked really well. And some things have not worked at all. Like commodities trading was a bad deal for me, but small business was incredibly rewarding.
It was.
So, yeah. Some stocks are great and some are losers. So you never know what you're going to get.
Right. And you had a unique perspective working as a CPA with literally, and I think you cover this in your book, thousands of different small business owners. Is that say? I mean, you were able to kind of accumulate a knowledge base of things that worked and didn't work.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of the crux of the book I wrote, which is now about 9 years old.
Wow.
Called Big Success in Small Business: Lessons Learned from 1,000 Small Businesses. The firm that I ran, I was the managing partner of, had about 3,500 clients. And over the course of 30 years as a CPA now, I've seen what works and what doesn't work for small businesses, kind of who succeeds and who doesn't.
Right.
And that's what my book is about: big success in small business. There's really nothing about investing specifically. It's more about all the things you need to do to succeed in small business.
Right. But a lot of those ideas are also applicable to
actually.
Oh yeah, show us.
That book,
there you go.
That book looks like this: Big Success in Small Business.
And I read the book twice, and I can say it's very enjoyable. You don't have to be a small business owner to get a lot of keen insights out of that book. Would you agree with that? I mean, a lot of the concepts that apply to small small business
Oh
apply to
yeah,
individuals?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, like never spending more than you have, like don't carry balances on credit cards,
right,
don't borrow money on cars and unproductive assets.
right.
um, the benefits of charisma, how you might try to add charisma in your life and how important that is to succeed in the world. There's
Yeah,
about 40 some chapters about all kinds of things.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes I like to even think that like even most people don't realize this, but we're all running our own small business, right? I mean, as an individual in a household. I mean, people don't like to
Absolutely.
think of it that way, but we are.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, everyone's got some source of income, and then they've got a bunch of expenses. And
Right.
what's left over is always the net income or net loss. And and I know you and I both like to do a lot of repairs ourselves,
Sure.
and not pay plumbers and electricians
Right.
uh,
Right.
if we can avoid it.
Even when you can afford to, because I mean, the old saying, "A penny saved is a penny earned," right? I mean, it's
That's Benjamin Franklin.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And if people want to be smart and want to know a lot about how to live, then they should study Benjamin Franklin and his Poor Richard's Almanac and his autobiography. There's my plug for Ben Franklin.
yeah. I forgot about the fact that you were a big Ben Franklin fan. Well, maybe we'll, maybe in one of our future episodes, we'll dedicate the whole episode to talking about Ben Franklin because it's a fascinating subject, right? I mean, some of the concepts that he came up with.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote the most popular set of magazines from about 1723 to 1758, about 25 years in a row in an important time in the U.S. history. A lot of the wisdom that Americans were getting, almost all of it really,
Right.
in print, was coming through Benjamin Franklin,
Right.
what he compiled and disseminated.
Interesting. Interesting. So, so I'm going to circle back a little bit here. You said something
Okay.
that piqued my interest when we were talking about individuals and how we're all, we all have a source of income. We all have expenses. I mean, do you find that to be one of the key fundamental factors to wealth preservation? That, hey, you need to make sure that you spend less than you bring in if you want to, right? Yeah,
Absolutely. It seems like anyone should be able to figure that out, right?
sure.
Like a first grader, but yet many people spend more than they make.
Yeah,
And you'd be surprised. I've seen people that make 300,000 a year spend more than they make
sure. Right.
every year.
Yeah. and and
It's
and and,
it's amazing.
and people who make 30,000 a year that
Yes,
spend less
absolutely.
that spend
Yes,
less and
and
at the end of the year they're wealthier than the guy that made 300,000, right?
that's exactly right.
Right.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
exactly right. Yep.
yeah. So I mean that really is a core fundamental uh, cornerstone to wealth preservation. I saw a headline this morning. 46% of Americans couldn't afford a $1,000 emergency expense, car repair, medical bill, whatever the case may be. 46% of Americans. Also, yesterday, new credit card, consumer credit data was released that showed that Americans are racking up credit card debt at near record paces. I mean, what do you think on a macro level when you look at the big picture out there? What do you think that spells for the future of the American economy?
Well, the debt thing always comes due eventually,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unless you're the U.S. government,
Right.
then it never comes due. But for individuals, the debt's always eventually got to get paid, and that's when the pain comes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so individuals rack up credit card debt to pay for things they need right now, like incredibly expensive tanks of gas,
Right.
for pickup trucks and whatever. People are paying $120 to fill up their pickup truck, or sometimes $200 if you've got a big tank and you're putting in diesel. But the interest rates just start piling up on that. The late fees.
Right.
I once talked to someone who said he had his ex-wife put $50,000 on the credit card, and then they got divorced, and then he ended up spending $250,000 paying off that credit card.
Sure. Sure.
Between interest on interest, late fees, years and years of paying it off.
Right.
So, which you don't want that.
Sure. No.
Bottom line, you don't want that. So the credit card debt, I honestly don't believe that anyone should carry any credit card debt. I believe in using them, but paying it off in full every month. I don't
Right.
believe in paying a penny of interest or penalties to the credit card companies.
Right. Right. And the credit card companies are required by law on their statements to have a big box that shows you how much you've paid that year in interest and how much you've paid in penalties. And you always want that box to say 0 and 0, right?
Yep.
Right? Right?
I've I've had a credit card for 30 years. I've never paid a dime of interest or penalties.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, but in terms of just the general overall economy, I mean, you're a guy. Well, let me circle back one more time. I'm going to repeat this. Shawn is invested uh, significantly in farmland, commercial real estate, residential real estate. Obviously, he follows the stocks. I mean, you've got your feet on the ground. You're not sitting in some ivory tower, right? Kind of. I mean, what is what's your sense
Well,
overall?
yeah, I just spent most of the last month rehabbing a commercial space
Right.
of 1,800 square feet, which was a lot of nasty cleaning and painting and patching,
Yeah.
rehabbing a bathroom and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm on the ground, absolutely. I
Yeah.
cut limbs and toss them in the woods at my farms.
Right.
And I was just sanding and painting part of my bobcat yesterday.
So is it safe to say you know how to start a chainsaw, correct?
Absolutely, I have 3 of them, and I start them a lot.
But you also understand what's going on with the Federal Reserve, and you have a vast level of knowledge. I mean, what's going on with the Federal Reserve? What do you think? I mean, what do you think is going to happen over the next year or 2 years?
Yeah, so I saw someone on CNBC or something like that ask a guru, "What do you expect to happen?" And he said, "If you can tell me the price of oil, then I can tell you what will happen."
Yeah.
Which there's a lot of wisdom in that. Virtually everyone has to buy gas or diesel, and how much they end up spending on that dictates how much they have left over to
Right.
spend on everything else.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are out there living paycheck to paycheck, and if as we've talked about before, if your gas budget goes from let's say 500 a month to 1,000 a month,
Mm-hmm.
where does the extra 500 a month come from?
Sure.
Well, it comes out of your clothing, your food, your entertainment,
Right.
your replacing your appliances,
So
whatever.
So let me ask you a question on that point. Do you think? I mean, recently we've heard bad reports from the retailers like Target, Walmart. They're all saying sales are slowing down. Do you think that's a major reason, right? Instead of running to Walmart or Target, now that money's going into gas tanks and food budgets as opposed to the Walmarts and Targets of the world.
Yeah, and I've said for years, I guess I'm gonna get deep on this one.
That's okay.
But I've said for years that the government can keep printing money infinitely. They can make incredible amounts of money in very few clicks of a button. The Fed can create $1 trillion just by typing in a bunch of zeros and hitting enter.
Sure.
Boom.
Right.
It's just like that. They've created it. And that all works until the time that the price of gas gets to $10 a gallon. That's what I've been saying for 10 years at least, or 20 years.
Yeah.
Or the price of milk gets to $10 a gallon, or the price of bread gets to $10 a loaf. There's a limit to what the common man on the street can afford to tolerate in his or her budget. So let's just say the price of gas doubles from here.
Right.
We may have some real problems in America with people being able to live, just eat and survive, which obviously will be an economic slowdown or just a disaster, an economic disaster, maybe. I don't know the level of it, but I do know there are people out there on the fringes, on the border of surviving.
Sure.
And people will do whatever they have to do to eat.
Right.
Right. I just talked to someone yesterday who makes he and his wife probably make 250 or something, and they're computer programmers.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, if I had to steal to eat, then that's what I would do.
Right.
you know
Right.
Now he won't have to, not for a long time, but what about the people that are making, I don't know, 20,000, fifty
Right.
thousand, and barely making it as it is?
And they could be in a position where they genuinely, the guy, computer programmer, and his wife making 250K, they can absorb some higher food costs. But the people, I think that's the whole point, making 20 or 30K, they can't absorb it, right? I mean, it may come to a point where like they can't afford the food.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And the government, if they keep handing out money, that just causes more inflation.
Right.
Like you've said in some previous video, they're kind of in a box here.
Mm-hmm.
If they're smart,
Mm-hmm.
they know that continuing to stimulate people with free money is just going to keep the inflation hot, which is just going to exacerbate the problem of people not being able to live.
Right.
So I guess Steve Forbes said the other day that we're working on the wrong side of this deal. We're trying to beat the inflation by crushing the economy, by
Right.
crushing demand.
Mm-hmm.
But that we should be working on the supply.
Yeah.
We should try to crush inflation by
Increasing.
greatly increasing the supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of everything.
Yeah. I
Probably makes a lot of sense on a lot of fronts.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I've heard several people say, and it makes sense. They're saying this inflation that we're having now isn't really, I mean, it is partially a monetary issue, a Fed monetary, all the money printing, obviously, that's one of the factors. But another big factor that nobody talks about is that it's what they call supply side inflation, that the supply is shrinking. And the Fed can, I mean, if the Fed wants to compensate for that side of it as well, then they may have to be so hawkish that we go into a severe recession or even depressionary type scenario.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to fight 8% inflation, you have to raise interest rates to 9%.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
To 8.5%.
And then,
because I mean, think about it. If I'm sitting there with the $100 bill, I can either spend it now and buy what I need,
yeah,
and that'll save me 8%.
Yeah.
Or I can invest it in a CD or something, and by God, I better make 9%.
Right.
On that to maintain my purchasing power.
Right.
Over the next year.
No, that's a great point. That people are getting to the point where they're afraid to hold on to their money. They'd rather spend it to get what they think they're going to need in the future now, as opposed to waiting where they may pay 8, 10, 15% higher down the road.
Yeah. And I've been talking to a lot of farmers for an article that I was writing this morning, and they're telling me they're seeing fertilizer costs double of what was last year.
Right.
Up 75%, 100%.
Yeah.
Even triple in some cases. Wow. People talking about fertilizer costs, and of course diesel fuel costs, herbicides, pesticides.
Right.
All those costs are up. So even though they're making more on the grain prices maybe than they generally do, their costs are up by even more.
Sure.
So their net income is going down.
Is it?
Well, they expect it to be down this year. Yeah.
And I think that's another a whole other episode for you and I where we can talk about a lot about the farmers, but also about this. You're seeing a lot of press lately about food shortages. This potential. I'd be curious. I think we could talk for another 20, 30 minutes about this idea that we may have food shortages coming in the next year. Is it worth it for the farmers to farm, right? I mean, if their expenses go up so high,
I mean, it's still worth it now, but yeah, obviously there's a limit to everything.
Sure.
But generally, we're talking about the state of affairs. The national debt is currently $30.5 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly what the government's paying on average on its debt.
Right.
But let's just say it's 2%.
Yeah, most of it's short term. I heard that last night. Like they most of it is 2 to 5 year duration. So yeah.
but just for argument's sake, let's say the government's paying 2% on its
Right.
debt. If, let's say, the government had to pay 7%
Mhm.
instead of 2%, let's say an increase of 5% that the government would have to pay, which is not a crazy number. It's been 7% before,
Sure. Yeah.
and it may need to be 7% to fight inflation. I don't know, but if the government had to pay 5% more on all of its $30 trillion of debt, that's over $1.5 trillion
Right.
of additional interest.
Expense. How much money does
of-
the government bring in every year from tax revenues? You're a CPA.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you know this number, right?
Well,
I think it's like
it's
3.
4 point, yeah, maybe 4,
Right.
somewhere around in that. But the government's planned expenditures for 2022 is $6 trillion.
Right. Right.
Okay, so if you're planning on spending $6 trillion, and then you had to pay an extra $1.5 trillion of interest,
Yeah.
all of a
Right.
sudden, it obviously blows things up, far worse than they already are. It would double the national deficit.
Mhm.
We're running a deficit of, I don't know, maybe 1.5 or $2 trillion right now.
Right.
And, you might double the annual deficit if interest rates went from 2 to 7%.
So maybe this will be our last point for this episode, but I want to ask your opinion on this. And it's not a black and white answer, but when we talk about all the debt, we talk about all the money printing, we talk about trying to fight inflation. Is there a risk that it just gets out of control at some point? Or do you think the Fed and it's kind of like the Wizard. I feel like the Fed's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like they're kind of behind the curtain and they say things to manipulate and they jawbone and they do this. And I mean, but does it ever get to a point where
Absolutely, there's a risk of it getting out of control. Absolutely. Look at Weimar Republic. Look at Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Look at Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've got some samples of billion-dollar bills and trillion-dollar bills from other countries. Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely, it can get out of control, and faster than you think.
Yeah,
3 months, 6 months, 12 months, things go from seemingly under control to completely insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I've heard that other people say that same exact thing, that like, or who was it, Hemingway? Somebody asked Hemingway how he went broke, and he said very slowly, and then all of a sudden it just happened.
Well, yeah, actually, I know this quote because it's one of my favorites. And they said, "How did you go bankrupt?" And he said, "First gradually, then suddenly."
Okay, well, thank you. I'm good at slaughtering quotes. Yeah, and that's what got me thinking of that is you talked about this potential increase in interest expense for our government if they do have to raise rates to these levels. It's like, I don't know. I can't think of a good analogy, but it's just like these things start to snowball, and it feels like to me that we're both about the same age. We've been following the markets for 30 years or so, that these events and the changes are starting to happen at a bit quicker and quicker pace. And I just worry, like, at some point, like, the Fed's over fighting this fire with this fire hose, and then, that causes a problem over here. And it's kind of like trying to keep an old piece of crap car running, like one thing leads to another.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The $4,000 transmission, and then the whole engine blows, and now the radiator's too old and rusty, and on and on. Exactly. No, I mean, I don't know if the government will let things get out of hand or how rapidly they could get out of hand, but I always think about Katrina, the Hurricane Katrina event. Who would have thought inside of America people could be dying of thirst or starving to death, or police would be robbing stores,
right?
Because because of a flood that happens for a few days.
Yeah.
So the thing I worry about in America, besides the Putin's nuclear bombs, whatever, is too many of the common people not being able to buy food,
right,
and fuel and electricity and the things that they need to live, and bands of marauders rioters, marauders, whatever you want to call them, just people starting to roam around, just taking what they need, which you start to kind of see a little bit in places like LA, San Francisco,
Chicago,
Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of that, we've kind of already seen.
Yeah.
But it could get far, far worse.
Yeah. People just walking into stores, groups of youth just walking into stores, Walgreens to Louis Vuitton, and
Right.
with hefty bags and just taking it with no regard, no worry,
Right.
whatsoever.
Exactly.
I mean, they're not even in
Right.
really that big of a hurry when you watch the video.
Why hurry?
They don't
Why
want to work
worry?
too hard, still on that stuff. Well, hey, this has been great, Shawn. I really appreciate you joining us today. Can we count on you for another episode next week?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
No, I really
Hopefully
do
we didn't
appreciate.
scare people too badly.
What's that?
I said, hopefully we didn't scare people too badly.
No. I think people want to know the truth, and like I said during my introduction, it's important to consider the source of information. And you're a guy that is level-headed, but also very credentialed, and I'm sure that my viewers are very appreciative of your time. And I think we've got a lot of great further subjects we can talk about. I'm kind of excited to do a series on Ben Franklin, right? I think we should talk about the food shortages, and then just general investment ideas. General ways that people can help kind of, protect their wealth. Obviously, no one has a crystal ball, but we can delve into all those subjects.
I did a story not that long ago that's at agriculture.com about how we can try to protect the food supply chain. Huge percentage of our food comes from California, for instance.
Right.
And
interesting.
Yeah, we can talk about that another time.
All right, bud. Hey, thanks again for your time, and we will see you again soon, okay?
Okay.